The wind had stopped screaming by the time I found the gate. It stood half buried in ivy and mist, rusted iron curled like ancient fingers, its hinges silent as breath. I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't been looking for somewhere, anywhere to rest. Behind me, the world was empty. Dirt roads that led nowhere, ruins where roofs used to be, people with hands like claws and eyes that didn't meet mine. I was a name with no echo, a boy with no past, or maybe I had one. I just couldn't remember it. The gate creaked open, as if it knew I'd come. Inside was not a garden, at least, not the kind I knew. It was a labyrinth, stone paths twisted under hanging branches that dripped with petals like blood and gold. Trees leaned in close, murmuring to each other. Flowers opened when I passed, their colors too vivid, too bright, like dreams set on fire. And at the center of it all was the old man. He wore moss for robes, his beard trailed like vines, and his skin was the color of old bark. He sat on a stone bench, pruning a rose made of glass, and when he looked at me, I felt the wind leave my lungs. "You came," he said, smiling. "The garden called you." "Nas," I told him. I didn't know why I was here. He nodded, as if that was the answer he expected. "Stay a while," he said. "Rest, eat, let the thorns forget you." I should have run, but I was tired, so I stayed. The garden fed me, not with food, though I found fruit hanging from silver-limbed trees, and water sweeter than spring rain. No, the garden fed on me, on my memories. It didn't hurt, not at first, just little things. The face of the woman who first called me boy, the shape of the house I once slept in, the sound of my own laughter, gone. In their place, blossoms bloomed, great golden lilies unfurled along the hedges, thorned vines thickened, red as ruby veins. The air grew thick with perfume and heat, and the old man smiled. "You see," he said one night, as we walked beneath boughs of flickering ivy, "your pain nourishes, your emptiness makes beauty, you're becoming part of it." "I don't want to forget," I told him. He touched my shoulder. "But you already have." "Nas," I tried to leave, really, but the paths changed behind me, turned in on themselves. I'd walk for hours and end up beneath the same twisted willow, its roots carved with faces I almost remembered. And the garden whispered, not in words, in names, names that weren't mine, but could have been, and one that was. I heard it one night, drifting between the rustle of leaves and the hiss of flower breath. My true name, not the one I had given to strangers, the one I'd buried, the one my mother, my real mother, I think had whispered into my ear, when the stars first looked down on me. Hearing it made my heart twist, like roots growing through my chest. "Nas," I asked the old man, "why does the garden know my name?" He sighed, "Because it keeps what we forget, it remembers what we trade." "Nas," I started seeing shapes in the petals, faces, mine, but older, mine, but not me. The garden had been doing this for a long time. I was just the newest bloom, but I didn't want to be a root, didn't want to become another statue carved in bark and memory. I wanted to belong, yes, but not at the price of being erased. So I made a choice, one I think the old man hoped I wouldn't make. I went to the center, the heart, where the roses grew without stems, hovering in air like dying stars, where the whispers became voices, and the voices sang, and I remembered everything. My name, my father's last words, the night I ran from fire, the feeling of being real. "Nas," I spoke my name aloud. The garden screamed, petals fell like blood, the paths cracked open, and the old man came to me, weeping sap. "You could have stayed," he said. "You could have belonged." "I'd rather be alone than forgotten," I said, and I walked out. The gate closed behind me. It did not lock, but I don't think I'll go back. Not yet. Nas, now I wander again, with fewer memories, but the ones I have are mine. And in the wind, I sometimes hear the garden call to others. "Come," it says, let the thorns forget you. And sometimes, I almost listen, but then I remember my name, and I keep walking. They carved me from the glacier's edge, on the darkest night of winter, a priest with frostbite hands, a hunter with sorrow in his eyes, and a girl with a braid like a raven's wing. She didn't speak while they shaped me, but she sang, a soft, wordless thing that stirred in me something I did not yet understand. They gave me no name, only purpose. Defend the village, the priest whispered, pressing a shard of sacred ice into my chest. Stand between us and the devouring dark, and I did. I was made of ice packed, tight as stone, runes scored into my limbs, strength bound to the season's cold. I did not sleep, I did not hunger, I did not dream. The beasts came, creatures of blizzard and claw, and I met them in the snow with fists like frost iron. I shattered them, again and again. The villagers praised me from behind their shuttered windows, but none came close, except her. She kept the hearth in the longhouse, the warmth for the young and the old, the place where soup simmered and stories lingered. Each dawn, when the storms calmed, she stepped outside to lay a hand on the doorpost and sing, and I listened. The words didn't matter, only the warmth in her voice, a warmth I began to want. It started as curiosity. I would linger closer each morning, my shadow stretching toward the light bleeding from her windows. The fire inside flickered like memory, and I imagined, not saw, imagined, what it might be like to sit beside it, to be warm, to feel. But fire is death, to that I knew. The priest had warned me, you are a weapon of winter, the fire will unmake you. So I stayed away, mostly. One morning, after a storm had cracked the sky, and left the trees bowed with ice, she stepped out barefoot. She saw me, truly saw me, and she smiled, not with fear, not with pity. She waved, and I, golem of ice, forged of prayer and purpose, waved back. From then on, she spoke to me, a little, each day. She told me her name, her thoughts, her dreams. I had no voice to answer, but I listened. She began to leave me things, woven cloth for my shoulders, pressed herbs frozen in jars. Once, a ribbon, she tied it to my wrist. It fluttered like a flame. I dreamed that night, for the first time, of warmth, of her hand in mine, of a fire that did not burn. I told myself it was only a dream, but I stepped closer to the longhouse each night, just a pace, then another. I felt myself drip, not from sun or storm, from her. The ice in my chest cracked, a little more each time, and something inside began to speak, not the priest's voice, not command, desire. The beasts came again, stronger, more twisted. They pierced me with their horns, raked me with frozen talons. I shattered them still, but slower. The melting made me weak, and the villagers began to whisper, not praise, but fear. She never did. She brought me a lantern once, its flame, low and golden. Do you ever feel cold? She asked. I couldn't answer, but I looked at the flame, and a tear slid down my cheek. It hissed as it fell. That night I walked to the threshold of the longhouse. The snow beneath me turned to slush. The wind wept around me. She opened the door, her face lit with firelight. Her hands reached out. Come in, she whispered. I cannot. I wanted to say, I will die, but I stepped forward anyway. One step, another. My fingers smoked. My chest cracked wide. The sacred ice pulsed once, then melted. She caught me as I fell. I thought the fire would hurt, but it didn't. It was her arms that burned, and I welcomed it. The last thing I felt was her forehead pressed to mine, the warmth of her tears, the sound of her voice. Thank you. In the morning, they found only water by the hearth, and a ribbon, still tied, still fluttering. They say a new protector guards the village now, stronger, colder, silent as snow, but she still sings at the doorpost, still waits, and sometimes, The fire flickers in the shape of a man's shadow, just for a moment, just long enough to remember. They left me with nothing but a name I no longer deserved. Not the crown, not the sword, not the robes stitched with lion thread and gold. Only a name spat like a curse, trailing behind me in every village I passed. The prince who failed, the prince who ran, the prince who watched his mother die, and did nothing. I wandered for years, kept to the edge of cities, earned coin by lifting barrels and gutting fish, spoke little, drank too much, but I never forgot her, the way she smiled before war councils, lips stained with tea and honey, the songs she sang in the old tongue, long after the empire forbade it, the warmth of her hand on my cheek, the night before the blade found her throat. I would have given anything to hear her voice again, and in the end, I did. It was in the market of a dying border town, a tent of bone lanterns and moth-bitten canvas. The merchant had eyes like cracked porcelain, and a mouth that smelled of cloves and rust. He didn't speak, he simply pointed to a teapot. White old hairline cracked across the base, a painted rose along its belly, faded to pink. I don't know why I picked it up, but when I did, I heard her voice, clear as a winter bell. My mother. At first, it was only echoes, memories, a lullaby I hadn't heard in 20 years, a proverb she used to chide me with, then names, faces I'd forgotten, places I'd buried in grief. Drink, she whispered, let me show you more. So I did. The first sip was warm, sweet, jasmine and memory. I saw her, young, fierce-eyed, a dagger in her belt and a book in her hand. She looked at me, saw me, said my name the way no one had in years. I dropped the cup, fell to my knees, and wept. I should have left the pot in the ruins where I slept, but I didn't, couldn't. Every night I lit a fire, boiled water, drank. Each cup opened a window. Her voice grew stronger. She began to speak to me, to not just echoes, but new things, thoughts, warnings, secrets I never knew she knew. And I listened. Thoughts. I listened. The world blurred. I stopped working, stopped wandering, built a shack on the cliffs. Just me, the wind and the teapot. My mother. She told me the names of the men who betrayed her, the blade that killed her, the sorcerer who wove the curse to seal her spirit. I wrote them down. I plotted vengeance. She helped me plan. One night, I asked her, what happens when the tea runs out? She was silent a long time. Then there will always be more. Just one more sip. But the pot never refilled. Not on its own. I had to pour water, had to steep root and leaf. But her flavor always returned. Her voice always followed. And something else began to slip. My voice, my thoughts. Sometimes I'd open my mouth to speak, and find her words instead. I laughed like her, cursed like her, and once I looked in the water's reflection and saw her face. Not mine, hers. My shy tried to stop. One day, poured the tea into the ground, broke the cup, buried the pot beneath stone, till my dreams were silent. My heart thudded like a dying drum, and I ached, not for her, for the sound of her. So I dug it up, cleaned the porcelain, lit the fire, drank. She sang to me that night, a song of kings, of sons who burned empires just to hold their mothers again. And I sang with her, voice shaking, soul slipping. Now I sit where sea meets stone, the teapot rests in my lap. The fire is low, the cup is full, I don't know where I end. And she begins. I think that's what she wanted. I think that's what I wanted, because if grief is a wound, this tea is the balm. And if memory is a chain, this cup is the key. Taos. One last sip, just one, to hear her say she loves me again, even if it means I forget who asked to hear it. The first time I saw her, she stood at the edge of the sea, where the foaming brine kissed the sand like a supplicant before a queen. She was human, fragile, and radiant, cloaked in moonlight and mystery, and I, a creature of hooves and wild plains, should never have approached. But fate is a hunter, and its arrows pierce where they please. I remember the wind tugging at my mane, salt on my lips, the warmth of her gaze. She sang then not words, but a melody that curled around my chest and squeezed like longing. I dared not move, not even to breathe. She turned, smiled, and vanished into the forested cliffs before I could speak. That night, I returned to the herd but could not eat. The grasses tasted like ash. My hooves itched for the shore. For days I wandered alone, hoping she would return. When she did, she brought no song, only silence and sorrow. Her village, she said, was dying, a sickness in the wells. Her people could not leave. Their legs, she said with a wistful smile, were not as swift as mine. What could I offer her? I, with the lower half of a beast and a prince's blood I had never asked for. She came again and again, and with each meeting, I forgot what it meant to run free. I learned her name, her laughter, her stories. She taught me to fear the sea, not for its storms, but for its vastness, how it promised much and gave little. I told her of the stars over the mountain passes, and how the winds there smelled of pine and old snow. We never touched, but our souls brushed like falling leaves. One night, under a red moon, she pressed a hand to my flank. If you could be like me, she whispered, would you? I did not answer then. What could I say? That I would trade 4 strong legs for 2 weak ones, just to walk beside her through her broken village. That I would abandon the wind, the hills, the gallop of my blood, just to feel her fingers on my skin. I sought the help of the crag witch, an old mare with a serpent's tongue and eyes like boiling pitch. She lived in a cave beneath the highlands, where even the hawks dared not fly. You would trade your hoofs for heels, she rasped. Foolish colt, I would trade more, I said, and meant it. She asked for my voice, not my speech, but my song, the music in my blood, the joy of the gallop, my freedom. I gave it freely. The pain was fire. My legs split, warped, twisted. My heart bucked like a panicked foal. When it was done, I stood trembling on 2 feet, human from head to toe, weak as a newborn. She found me by the sea, where I had first seen her. She wept and held me and called me beautiful, but my silence haunted us. I could no longer tell her of the stars, or how I missed the feel of earth beneath pounding hooves. I followed her to the village, and though I walked beside her, I had never felt so far away. Days turned to weeks. The villagers smiled at me, this strange mute wanderer, who had saved their daughter from loneliness. But their wells were still poisoned. Their crops still failed. I could not help them. I was no healer. I was no hero. She grew quiet. The joy drained from her eyes like light from a dying sun. One night, I woke to find her staring at the sea. I touched her shoulder, and she flinched. I asked you if you could be like me, she said, voice brittle, but I never asked if I could be like you. She ran then, into the woods, and I followed, weak, stumbling, struggling to keep up with my new legs. I caught up to her as she lay against a tree, panting loudly. I'm sorry, she said. I wanted you to be something you're not. And there it was, truth cold as rain. I had changed my body, but not my soul. I had left behind who I was for love, and lost both. At dawn, I returned to the crag witch. I could not beg. I had no voice, but she looked into my eyes, and saw all she needed. You've learned, she said. Pain teaches what pride never could. She returned to me what I had lost, though some songs I would never sing again. My body grew strong, hooved and swift once more. I did not see the girl again, but sometimes, at twilight, I gallop along the cliffs and see her silhouette on the shore. She does not wave, nor do I stop, but the wind carries her song, and I remember that once I gave everything for love, and though it broke me, I do not regret it. I was born in a city of light. The towers of Illyrin spiraled into the heavens, spun from silver and star glass. The elves who lived within them were as radiant as the dawn, tall, slender, their eyes like polished gems, their laughter like wind chimes in spring, and amid their perfection, I was a stain. I do not remember my mother. They told me she died giving birth, and no one claimed the role of father. I was left in the hall of the hearth-keepers, raised by the elder maids who swept ash from the great fires and mended the robes of the high-born. Even they looked upon me with veiled pity, for I was hunched, my back twisted like gnarled root. My skin bore the color of damp ash, and soot clung to me no matter how I scrubbed. My ears were too wide, my fingers too short, my eyes glowing faintly gold instead of the moonlit silver of the elves. They called me Smudge, Crackborn, Forge Burden, never by name. I learned early not to speak unless spoken to move quietly, to shrink when others passed. I became as much a fixture in the great city as the moss on the lower walls, noticed only when someone wanted it gone. But I watched the smiths in the lower tier, who shaped blades that sang. I watched the glass weavers who spun crystal wings for the humming falcons. And more than anything, I watched the forge. There was a forge beneath Illyrin, older than even the eldest trees, carved into the roots of the mountain itself. It was said the fire there had burned since the world's first breath. Only the master artisans were allowed within its echoing halls. I was not permitted near, but the forge called to me. I stole moments between sweeping, between hauling coal to creep to its edge. I listened to the hammer song through stone. I smelled the tang of molten metal. Then sometimes, when no one looked, I touched the cold iron scraps discarded at the edge of the smithy and whispered to them, and they answered, not in words, not as elves speak, but they warmed, shifted, shivered as if eager. The first time I shaped a thing was by accident. I had found a broken blade, its edge chipped, its hilt cracked. I held it in my small soot-streaked hands and imagined it whole. I closed my eyes and felt not just the metal but the spirit within it. I pressed my palms together, and when I opened them the blade was new. Not as it had been, but better. It hummed with life. I hid it, terrified. Word of the magic blade spread within days. The nobles whispered of a new artisan, perhaps a child of prophecy. The forge masters seethed, unable to claim credit. I said nothing, but I made more, quietly, in secret. A clasp that sang lullabies, a kettle that brewed perfect tea, a pendant that shimmered with memories of lost love. Still I was nothing in their eyes, until the mountain rumbled. The earth split one night, deep and low. The forge fires dimmed. A crack opened in the deepest floor of Illyrin. A black wound hissing smoke and whispers. Something ancient stirred beneath us, something the elves could not name. Fear swept the city. The queen's artificers could not seal the rift. Their runes failed. Their light flickered. And in desperation they called for volunteers to descend into the fissure. No elf stepped forward, but I did. They laughed, of course, but the queen in her wisdom, or her panic, let me go. Let the sootling fall, they said. He's worth less than the coal he carries. I climbed into the earth. The dark closed around me like a fist. Deeper and deeper I went, following the warmth I had known since I first felt the forger's breath. The stone whispered, the metal sang, and when I reached the chamber at the bottom of the world I met them. They were short, their spines hunched like mine, their eyes glowed with molten gold, their scales shimmered like hammered bronze. Kobolds, my people. They did not need to ask who I was, they knew me. One stepped forward, ancient, crowned with iron filigree. You are the Emberborn, she said. They showed me the true forge, not of elven stone, but of dragon bone and living fire. They taught me the songs of shaping, the rites of awakening. I stayed for 7 days and 7 nights, and in that time, I forged my first heart steel, a living blade that pulsed like a heartbeat, that wept when I wept, that stood tall when I did not, and with it I returned. The rift had widened, the darkness was rising, shadows spilled into Illyrin like smoke with teeth. I emerged from the mountain, no longer hunched in fear. My scales shone like firelight, my hands were blackened with sacred soot, My heart steel burned with purpose. The elves stared uncomprehending, and then I drove my blade into the stone. The song of the forge rose, a note that sang into every tower, every root, every bone. The mountain answered, the rift sealed, the dark fled, silence fell. Then all, some bowed, most only stared, but I did not wait for praise. I returned to the mountain. The elves remember the Emberborn, though they know not my face. They tell stories of the soot-covered boy who saved their city, who forged miracles, who walked into shadow and returned a king. But I remember more. I remember that worth is not in beauty or birthright. It is in creation, in the spark of craft, in the shaping of the soul into something lasting. And in the mountain's heart I forge still, for in fire and stone I found my truth. I was never what they wanted, born the youngest son of a minor noble house, too soft, too plain, too quiet for court. I watched from the fringes as my elder brothers were groomed for diplomacy and war. I learned early how to smile at the right moment, how to nod and slip away, how to become small, and small I remained. When father died and my brothers marched off to seek fortune, the manor passed to me, a hollow inheritance, crumbling tapestries, empty halls. The estate was noble in name only. The tenants called me the quiet lord. The court barely remembered I lived, but I remembered them. I remembered the way they looked past me, eyes gliding like birds over water. I remembered the heat of laughter that wasn't meant for me. And most of all I remembered her, Lady Sylvine, all silver hair and cruel lips, who once said to my face that I seemed like someone drawn in faint charcoal. It stayed with me. Years passed. The quiet became unbearable. I studied alone in the manor's forgotten libraries, learning the histories no bards sang. I read of mirror glass and soul binding, of glamours that warped the eye and flesh alike. Forbidden, yes, but what good are rules when no one sees you to scold? In the cellar I found it, a shard of the old world, a sliver of shadowed silver, framed in runes that burned cold. A mirror. It did not reflect as a true mirror should. When I looked into it I did not see me. I saw a man handsome and tall, jaw sharp as a blade, eyes aglow with charm. A man who could make Sylvine's breath catch. A man the court would kneel to, and in a whisper like dry silk the mirror spoke. Wear what they long for, become what they see. I reached out, the surface rippled, and I stepped through. The next day, I went to court. Gasps followed me down the hall. They called me radiant, mesmeric. Sylvine looked twice, then a third time, and her lips parted, no longer cruel. Lord Halvan clasped my arm and spoke to me, as if I were a dear friend. Servants scrambled to please me. Even the Queen's steward blinked in wonder and bowed, but they weren't seeing me. The glamour shifted with each gaze. To Sylvine, I was a dashing libertine with stormy eyes. To Halvan, a clever tactician draped in nobility. To the steward, a pillar of poise and wisdom. I saw it in the mirror each night, a different man for every pair of eyes. I told myself it didn't matter, that what mattered was finally being seen. The days blurred, my life became a theater, each room a stage, each face a mirror shaping my own. I stopped sleeping. The mirror no longer needed rituals to change me. It pulsed in my veins, its magic a second skin. But something began to shift. One morning, I passed a polished window and saw a man I did not recognize. His smile was mine, but wrong, wide and fixed, like paint cracking on old wood. Another night Sylvine traced my face and said, dreamily, I adore how your eyes glow like a wolf's under moonlight. I'd never had glowing eyes. Soon I stopped checking mirrors altogether. They lied, or perhaps I did. I tried to find myself again, read old letters, walked the halls of my childhood, touched the familiar oak banister I'd once carved my name into. But the name was gone. Even my voice had changed. I heard it echo once and did not know who spoke. Then came the feast. The Queen herself invited me, said she'd heard tales of the Lord of Many Faces. I sat at the head of the golden table. Jewels glimmered on my hands, wine red as rubies in my cup. Courtiers hung on my every word, and in that moment I felt the hollowness crack. I stood. I am not who you think I am, I said. My voice wavered. I don't know who you see, but it is not me. They laughed, thought it a jest, a clever performance. I fled the hall. In my chamber the mirror stood waiting. Who am I? I whispered. The glass rippled. Shapes swam behind the surface, faces countless shifting. My brothers, my father, Sylvine, the queen, the court. Then a child with my eyes crouched in shadow, forgotten. Then something else, something tall, grinning, hollow-eyed, wearing all the faces like masks on a string. You are who they love, it said in all their voices at once. You are what they made you. I screamed. I shattered the mirror, but even in shards it reflected 1,000 fragments, 1,000 selves, all looking back. Then now I wander the manor again, alone. No guests come. The court does not write. The glamour is broken, or perhaps only sleeping. I no longer seek reflections, but sometimes in still water I see him, the man with the shifting face, and he smiles. And sometimes I feel a warmth in my chest, aching and old, the memory of a boy who just wanted to be loved.